the dance-happy 70s, we had wonderful male choreographers who became terrific directors of marvelous dance-driven musicals. And then in the 80s, we had mega musicals in which the only thing that moved were chandeliers and helicopters. Welcome to Women in Theater. I'm Linda Weiner, theater critic and arts columnist of Newsday. And our guest today is Susan Stroman, whose healthy, ingenious, brilliant choreography took the dance back to the humans with Crazy for You. She then became the first woman director-choreographer with Contact and, oh yes, a little show called The Producers. So there's like, how many Tony Awards? Do you actually, can you count?
For
7,
me,
8?
No, 5. I have 5 Tony Awards.
5 Tony Awards.
Yes,
Oh, forget
yes.
it. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you'll have to leave. I thought it was.
I knew you thought it was more. I know, but it's 5.
Both as a director of musicals and choreographer.
Well, as choreographer, and the last Tony I won was for The Producers, which was for director and choreographer.
And first woman?
Well, I think for
the combination?
Well, no, Julie Taymor.
But
well,
she
she
wasn't
did
a choreographer.
director. She wasn't choreographer.
For the director.
But yes,
Yeah,
first woman as a combination. Yes.
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 So you're the first. You're our return to the what we used to in the '70s call the dancicles.
Yes.
The dance-driven musicals.
I think so. I think so. Well, I love dance so much, and I love it in the theater. You know, I love the theater. I have a great passion for the theater, but because my roots are in dance and in music, it's all about how to make this play sing and dance.
And they really are plays for you. I mean,
Yes.
let's talk. Everyone wants to hear about producers, so let's talk about Contact.
Okay.
Here was a really revolutionary for Broadway idea. These are 3 dance pieces with virtually no words at all, no singing.
Mm-hmm.
How much controversy was there in terms of where they were going to slot you? Were you worried about your category?
Well, you know, you don't. I went into it not worried about a category, and it came about by Andre Bishop at Lincoln Center saying to me, "If you have an idea, I will help you develop it." And to hear that from a producer is like music to one's ears, because you usually have people throw scripts on your desk, but no one will ever say that to you. No producer will ever take that kind of chance. So I did have an idea and thought, well, let's workshop it. And Andre was very keen on doing that to see how it goes. And at that point, it wasn't to be in a category. I didn't have to be in a musical, be a play, be a dance piece. It was open. So once I had that freedom, I could create anything I wanted. And I love crossing over in the different mediums. I love that, and exploring other ways to put on theater. So Contact really, as in any project, you go into these projects sort of just hoping for the best. You don't really think of what's going to happen down the line. You immerse yourself in a big bucket of artists, of design team and collaborators and actors, and you just sort of swim in this pool of art, and then you come up on opening night. And what happened was we did this workshop, and then Andre allowed us a production at Mitzi Newhouse, and then of course I came up on opening night, and the response was amazing. And so then all of a sudden it was everyone else who said, well, what category should it be
Well, sure,
in?
because it went from downstairs at the
Yes.
Mitzi Newhouse, where it's off Broadway and you don't
Yes.
have to worry, and then you went up to the Beaumont, which then it's called Broadway, and then you get Tony eligible, and then you have to be put in categories.
Yes, I know, which is quite tricky. And then it opened up a whole can of worms of, you know, well, would you say Les Mis wasn't a musical because it didn't have dance? Or would you say Ain't Misbehavin' wasn't a musical because it didn't have a book? It had the 3 elements, but how they were distributed was different.
Yeah, it was, you know, so good for the theater to have to deal with that.
Yes.
Then by the time Twyla Tharp comes along
Yes.
with Moving Out, nobody even thinks about categories anymore because, of course, you worked it all out. Your career really took off with Crazy for You.
Yes.
I mean, I saw your work before that. I saw this little Candra Nib wonderful review that you did downtown called And the World Goes Round, with some little dancer named Karen Ziemba in it.
Yes,
you do stick together.
Yes,
this is great. But then the moment where somebody said, "Oh, look at this, a choreographer, thank God we've got a new one," was crazy for you.
Yes. Well, I think it sort of exposed me to the masses. People had seen The World Goes Round. They had seen a few things that I had done in the city, Liza's show at Radio City Music Hall, and an opera with Hal Prince at the New York City Opera.
Oh yeah, did know it.
So, but
Don
it
Giovanni?
was
Don Giovanni.
Don Giovanni.
Yeah, yes.
But it was indeed Crazy Few that sort of exposed me, and of all shows for me, it was Gershwin music, which I love. I love the old standards. I grew up. My father was a wonderful piano player, and so I grew up with all those great standards. So I have a great
He was a
affection
salesman
for them.
by day,
yes,
and
played the piano,
club piano by night.
So all those, Kern and Gershwin and Rodgers and Hammerstein, and all come quite naturally to me as having a great sensibility for them. And then developing the music for the dance with my wonderful dance major, Peter Howard, a wonderful piano player. And so it had, and allowing a whole new book to be done, and working with that creative team of Mike Ockrent, wonderful director, and then Robin Wagner and William Ivy Long. So I was surrounded by the best, and then to have a joyous show to do, and a show that somehow was already in my heart.
And to fall in love.
Yes,
Now,
and to fall in love.
did you actually fall in love with the director, Mike Ockrent, during Crazy for You, or did it come in then you did Christmas Carol together, and you also did
Yes,
Big
and we did
together?
Big together, yes.
So was this courtship going on behind our backs through this whole thing?
No, it was after Crazy Few opened. It was after Crazy Few opened. So now I was completely the choreographer, and he was the director. And it was after the success of Crazy Few, and Mike was to go back to London, that all of a sudden, he had to come back, and it wasn't for the theater. So it was very romantic. He was an extraordinary man.
And everybody just felt so terrible for.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do this now. we don't do the Barbara Walters "Can I Make Her Cry" thing.
I know, good, because there's no tissue on the table.
But you were married for such a short time, and then
Yes.
He died in '99 of leukemia.
Yes.
But did he really, from the hospital bed, read you your reviews of Contact?
He did. He really did.
You went home, and
I went home that night, and in the morning he called at 5 o'clock. He called, the phone rang at 5 o'clock, and of course I don't know whenever the phone would ring, I didn't know what was going to happen, and the phone rang at 5 o'clock, and the doctors had brought him some tea and the papers, and he read me the reviews of Contact. And so yes, that's how I found out about it.
Wow. And here you are, this wholesome girl from Delaware, right? Who came to New York to. I'm going to change the subject. I'll do this. So how did you know you actually, even though you were a dancer as a child, you took your little five-year-old dancing lessons and everything, and did some theater there. You always knew you wanted to choreograph.
Yes.
Where does that happen in a little girl's head?
Well, I think it's because of this great passion I have for music, and when I hear music, I envision these great scenes of dance and characters and costumes and lighting, and I always have ever since I was little. So it's something that's always been a part of me. When I came to New York, I came as a song and dance gal because I could sing and dance, but in fact it was really just to assess the situation, because I knew I couldn't just come to New York and take over. I had to come and find out about New York. But growing up, it was always the creative side, to be on the other side of the table, that gave me great joy. So even in the community theaters or in the band at high school, marching
band formation choreography.
Yes, absolutely, which got me ready for the Music Man.
Majorette.
Yes, absolutely.
Can you still do it?
Sure, that's why I'm so good with props.
And you are so good with props. But one thing more, you said once that I love this, that you want to be a choreographer as soon as you learned how to spell it. Did your parents say you can't do it until you can
Learn how to spell it.
I mean, most little girls think that you make up your dance, right? You get up and you dance, and but you knew there was going to be a guy that you wanted to be the one who told him what to do.
Yes, and I think, you know, it's too, my folks made me aware of all those Fred Astaire movies, and I was able to recognize that the music and the dance went together and it supported one another, and that, you know, the idea of Astaire dancing through character, making it effortless, and all those wonderful elements of those movies, I was able to actually absorb more on a creative and analytical way. And so I knew that that's what I wanted to do.
You always talk about your brain dancing. You'd rather have your brain dancing than your feet.
Yes, that's true.
But when you came to New York, you did dance in Chicago, which is hilarious because you played the Hungarian. You replaced Graziella Daniel as the Hungarian.
Yes.
Can you say not guilty?
Not guilty. And then I went to do it on a different. I think what's wonderful about Chicago being so, you know, this big phenomenon is that everyone in my generation now in New York has had something to do with Chicago. We were either in it, or we loved it, or we saw it a million times, or we were part of the original one, or part of the revival, or part of a tour, or did it in summer stock. And for the show to have such a phenomenal success is fantastic. And I'm very good friends with Kander and Neb, and I couldn't be happier for them that they've had this success.
Fred Kander and John
Kander.
John Kander, Fred Ebb, of course, the composers of Cabaret in Chicago, and Steel Pier.
Yes.
A musical that I liked a lot, and sort of didn't get the.
Yes, but you know, it was interesting. Steel Pier was the reason Andre Bishop saw Steel Pier, and that was the reason he said, "If you have an idea, I'll help you develop it."
That was actually that was the first big show you were a director and a choreographer for. Am I wrong?
Well, yes, and The Music Man. They sort of kind of happened at the same time. So I was asked to do The Music Man by the Dodgers, by Michael David, and so that opened also a little bit before Contact went to Broadway.
Before we get off Chicago, though, I really still want to. You did have some contact. You did study with Bob Fosse for almost a year, right? Contact.
Well, yes, yeah, I had contact with him.
Do you feel, because you don't really have a vocabulary like a Martha Graham vocabulary or a Balanchine vocabulary or a Twyla Tharp vocabulary or a Fosse, are there any of those choreographers that, not Tharp, but any of these choreographers that you feel special kinship for, even though you don't have something that you look at and say, oh, that's Stroman?
Well, I think of all of them that I admire, I think, is really Robbins, in the sense of he was able to...
Jerome Robbins.
He was able to not impose a style on a theater piece. He was able to make those sailors dance like men, but still they were doing ballet steps. He was able to make the street gangs dance like men in West Side Story, but still have all the technique and essence of ballet. And somehow, and you know, he's created these iconic steps of bottle dancers from Fiddler on the Roof. And so there's something about that idea of because I feel my role as a director and choreographer is to make it believable when someone launches into song and dance, and therefore it's dancing in that character and propelling the character and the plot forward. And I think that for me is not so much about creating a style as it is servicing the actor and servicing the story. I consider myself more of a storyteller, and when I watch Robbins' work, I see it more as storytelling.
Now, you are one of the first outsiders to be asked to create a full-length ballet for New York City Ballet for the winter of, when are we, 2004.
Yes.
So that's what you'll be working on right now.
Yes.
Part of the Balanchine centenary. And you... will these be story ballets? Because
yes,
City Ballet is so...
I know. Well, when Peter Martins called me, it's for the Balanchine celebration, and I'm sure it was because of Balanchine's connection with the theater, his link to the theater, that is the reason Peter called me. And I've put together an evening called Double Feature, and it's an homage to silent film. And it's taking 3 elements of silent film, classical ballet, and musical comedy, and putting it together. And so it's given me, again, that idea of a freedom of crossing over in the different mediums and bringing them together.
It's 2 acts?
It's 2 acts, and the first act is a drama, and the second act is a comedy.
Telling a story through dance is certainly something that was quite important in the producers. People talk about the producers. When they talk about producers, when they're not talking about how much the tickets are and whether or not Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick will be in it, they talk about these set pieces that you've done, the little old ladies with the walkers, the puppet pigeons, the Nazi puppet things. You always do like to work with props. I mean, at least if I can identify one thing, it's usually that there will be some really nifty use of props integrated into the thing. With the producers, must have been very challenging.
Well, it's interesting with the producers because whenever I do any show, I research that either decade or geographical area, and I immerse myself in that time for the story, and to find out what was happening in society at the time, what people did have in their hands, and how props might exemplify a character or make it stronger. And for Oklahoma, it would have been researching the Old West in America.
This was Oklahoma, the Trevor Nunn's production that you got an Olivier for choreography in London.
Yes. And for Crazy Few, it would have been 1930s in New York City. For Contact, it would have been immersing myself in the contemporary New York meatpacking district in New York City and how people react in those clubs. But in the producers, it was immersing myself into the world of Mel Brooks. So it was a completely different kind of research.
Now, did he actually show up at your home and sing that face, that beautiful face, and dance into your living room and stand?
Indeed.
This was your introduction to Mel Brooks.
Yes, I was doing a Christmas Carol at Madison Square Garden. I was rehearsing, and I got a phone call saying that Mel Brooks wants to meet you. And I thought, oh, all right, well, maybe next Thursday. And he said, no, he wants to meet you right now, today at 6 o'clock. Oh, okay. And I thought, oh my goodness, because I had already admired and loved Mellon. I knew all his movies and understood and knew his comedy. And so I was thrilled to think that he might be knocking on my door. So I ran home, and right at 6 o'clock, bang on, he knocked on that door, and I opened the door, and there he was, the legendary Mel Brooks. But instead of saying hello, he launched full voice into the song That Face, which opens Act 2 of the producers. And he kept singing. He went into my house, went right down the hallway, jumped up on the sofa, finished the song, looked down at me and said, hello, I'm Mel Brooks. And I thought, well, no matter how this show goes, it will be one of the greatest adventures of my life if I go on this journey with this man. And it has been.
It must have been.
Yeah.
Do you think there will be another one? They keep talking about, well, maybe you'll do Blazing Saddles, or maybe you'll do Young Frankenstein. Are
yes,
these,
they
these
are. Absolutely, they are working on Young Frankenstein. Mel has written pretty much the first act, and he'll call me and sing me the different songs. And I have to say they're very funny.
You have to deal with hump. What hump?
I know.
There's your props.
I know.
There's your props. When you also told me recently, just before we came on, that after the New York City Ballet thing, you will be working on Frogs. Now, this is a legendary piece. Could you talk a little bit about Frogs, which nobody knows, but everybody thinks they know?
Yes. Well, I'm going to do the Frogs at the Vivian Beaumont Theater up at Lincoln Center, and Stephen Sondheim has written the music, and Nathan Lane has written the book. And it was originally done at Yale, and many years ago, I think about 40 years ago, and but it was done as sort of as a one-act piece, and it was done with the Yale swim team.
Yeah, this was the swimming pool one,
the
right?
swimming pool one. And I don't think it lasted more than about 45 minutes. And what happened was Nathan called me, and he had done an album for the Library of Congress and had done some of the songs from it. And he said, do you know anything about this? And we got together, and Nathan was quite keen on exploring it. And I thought, well, I'll only do this if Sondheim will rewrite and add new music. And so we do a new piece. I didn't want to jump into a swimming pool. Although now that I think of it, no, but I wanted to do a new piece, and so Nathan and I went to Sondheim's, and he seemed quite jazzed by the idea. And so the book is adapted from Bert Shevlov's book, and it's based on Aristophanes the frogs in 400 BC, and clearly they were having the same problems in 400 BC that we're having today politically. So it's artistic, but it's also very political, and the opening line is, the time is the present, and the place is ancient Greece.
That's lovely.
And Aristophanes was the satirist of his time, and Nathan Lane's doing the book, and because Nathan is also starring in it, he's sort of writing for himself, and also is able to apply what's happening politically today in the piece. So it's a perfect show for the summer festival at Lincoln Center.
That would be the summer of 2004?
Yes, 2004. 4.
Oh, soon. Okay.
Soon, yes.
And when you cast Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick, did you guys have any idea that you were going to create something of a problem, really, for the show? That the show became identified as their show as opposed to the show being the star? And that, it's sort of a little pact with the devil.
Well, the thing is, no, you don't think about that when you cast them. When we cast them, everyone said that they will never do what Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder did. And how could they? And how dare we even touch this piece? But then, Nathan Lane and Matthew Broderick sort of stood on the shoulders of Zero Mostel and Gene Wilder and created their own version of the show. And their chemistry is so strong, and I think that's what is hard to reproduce. It's a very special chemistry that they have. They love each other, they make each other laugh, and but in creating it, no, you don't think that you're going to do something that is difficult,
Because it's iconic in itself,
Yeah.
so that when you tried to cast wonderful people who were non-stars, the audience then was trained to want to buy the stars.
Yeah.
So now do you think from now on you're always going to have to cast the producers with stars?
Well, no, I don't think so, because, the national tours do quite well and sell out without stars. And I think it was just that Matthew and Nathan they're known as New Yorkers, too. They're known as two actors who are movie stars but also love New York, live in New York. So everything about them people want to see and be near. But I think the show can stand. It has proven that it stands on all these tours. And
Well, LA, though, has Martin Short and
Jason
Alexander. So,
Yeah.
again, they're not anonymous.
But I think these roles that were created, too, actors love to play. Many actors would love to play the role of Max Bialystock and love to play the role of Leo Bloom. So I think down the road we will find the odd star that really wants to take a shot at it. But I think they have made theater history.
Yeah.
And, you don't know that's going to happen when you're in the middle of it.
I've always wanted to ask you, because I've asked myself this often when I'm writing about dance, is there a difference between show dance and concert dance in terms of the development of the ideas? Mm-hmm. You must be very aware of that right now because you're doing show and you're doing the ballet.
Yes.
Could you talk a little bit about the differences?
Well, there is a great deal of freedom in concert dance, and the difference is in the theater, a theater choreographer does have to service that plot and that story. You are more of a storyteller, and you're servicing lyrics. It's all about making the actor look like a natural song and dance person.
Take a Boyd Gaines
yes,
and turn him into a Fred Astaire. Yes.
But in concert dancing, you are dancing the role of every man. In the theater, you are dancing the role of a specific man. So in concert dance, it has a more abstract form and takes on almost a larger feel, and can be interpreted in many different ways. But in the theater, it's always best for the story if it's interpreted clearly. and the same way by the audiences. I did a piece for the Martha Graham Company, which I love doing because it was abstract and it was about dreams and still had a theme. I still had a theme and had a relationship with different couples, but in fact it had an abstract quality that did indeed give me a great deal of freedom.
Now, modern dance has been dominated by women, by women choreographers. Broadway dance, except for Agnes DeMille, who also didn't really direct. She was. You and Graziella Danielle and just a few others are really the pioneers in that. Why do you think women, this was not seen as, the Broadway dance was not seen as a position for women, as a role?
You know, I'm not quite sure. I'm asked that quite a bit of where are all the women in charge of the theater.
Hello,
yes,
we're
hello.
The chicks, yeah.
But the only thing I can think of is maybe it's just, which is different from concert dance and modern dance, but the finances of the theater and are such that it is, you know, a terrible stereotype to think that women could not be in control of something that had $10 million at stake or $12 million at stake. And 20 years ago, it started, shows were $5 million, then they went to $8 million. 10 years ago, they were $10 million. And now, you know, shows the money that it takes to put on a Broadway musical is enormous. And I think it's just that old stereotype that perhaps a woman might not be able to be in control of that much money or that the investor's money. That, of course, has changed, and that's changed in the last, you know, slowly 10 years.
Well, slowly 10 years, but, you know, but the producers must have just you just pushed it out the door. They cannot assume that a woman cannot be in charge of making gobs of money for people.
Well, no, it was quite odd. My first meeting, I have to say, with the producers was with about 12 men around a table at a restaurant with Mel Brooks, and I thought, oh my goodness, how is this going to go? How is this going to go over? But I think you know what's wonderful about Mel, for someone who actually makes fun of women, you know, even in the producers and in his movies, he was total respect and total support, and never once did I think he ever thought I couldn't do it. And I thought, well, then look who he's married to. He's married to Anne
That's
Bancroft.
True, not bad. Our time is up, and I'm really, really sorry, but I love talking to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Susan Stroman, and thank you for being here. On behalf of the League of Professional Theater Women, I'm Linda Weiner, and this has been Women in Theater.